Welcome to Top Culture, a channel entirely dedicated to general knowledge ranging from art to history and religion and of course science. Stay tuned for more brain-feeding tops. As the title suggests, today we're focusing on the 10 most famous paintings of all time, as well as a few interesting facts about each one of them. I am fairly sure you have seen the majority of, if not all of these paintings already, but how much do you actually know about them? I hope that by the end of the video you will know a lot more. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. Number 10. The Persistence of Memory, also known as the Persistence of Time. It was painted in 1931 by Salvador Dalí, and it's one of the most recognizable works of surrealism. The painting has been part of the collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York since 1934, when it was donated anonymously. It is sometimes referred to by more descriptive titles such as melting clocks or the soft or melting watches. It is said that the soft watches are an unconscious symbol of the relativity of space and time, a surrealist meditation on the collapse of our notions of a fixed cosmic order. Asked whether this was in fact the case, Dalí replied that the soft watches were not inspired by the theory of relativity, but by the surrealist perception of a camembert melting in the sun. It is possible to recognize a human figure in the middle of the composition that Dalí used in several contemporary pieces to represent himself, the abstract form becoming something of a self-portrait, reappearing frequently in his work. It can be read as a fading creature, one that often appears in dreams where the dreamer cannot pinpoint the creature's exact form and composition. The orange clock at the bottom left of the painting is covered in ants. Dalí often used ants in his paintings as a symbol of decay. Another insect that is present in the painting is a fly, which sits on the watch that is next to the orange watch. The fly appears to be casting a human shadow as the sun hits it. The Persistence of Memory employs the exactitude of realist painting techniques to depict imagery more likely to be found in dreams than in waking consciousness. Dalí returned to the theme of this painting with the variation, the disintegration of the persistence of memory in 1954, showing his earlier famous work systematically fragmenting into smaller component elements and a series of rectangular blocks which reveal further imagery through the gaps between them, implying something beneath the surface of the original work. The original painting is worth $550 million. Number 9. The Kiss. An oil-on-canvas painting with added gold leaf, silver, and platinum, painted at some point in 1907 and 1908, during the height of what scholars call his golden period, by the Austrian symbolist painter Gustav Klimt. It was exhibited in 1908 under the title The Lovers, as stated in the catalogue of the exhibition. The painting depicts a couple embracing each other, their bodies entwined in elaborate beautiful robes decorated in a style influenced by the contemporary Art Nouveau style and the organic forms of the earlier arts and crafts movement. The painting is in the Österreichische Gallery Belvedere Museum in the Belvedere, Vienna, and is considered a masterpiece of Vienna secession and Klimt's most popular work. The background evokes the conflict between two- and three-dimensionality, intrinsic to the work of Degas and other modernists. Paintings such as The Kiss are visual manifestations of the end-of-century spirit because they capture a decadence conveyed by opulent and sensuous images. The use of gold leaf recalls medieval gold-ground paintings, illuminated manuscripts, earlier mosaics, and the spiral patterns in the clothes recall Bronze Age art and the decorative tendrils seen in Western art since before classical times. The man's head ends very close to the top of the canvas, unlike traditional Western paintings, which reflects the influence of Japanese prints, as does the painting's simplified composition. It has even been argued that in this picture, Klimt represented the moment Apollo kisses Daphne, following the metamorphosis of Ovid narrative. Art historians have also suggested that Klimt is depicting the tale of Orpheus and Eurydice. More specifically, Klim seems to be showing the exact moment when Orpheus turns around to caress Eurydice and loses his love forever, as in the painting the woman being held is slightly translucent, indicating a fading away or disappearance as told in the story. The original painting will most probably never be sold, as Austria considers it to be a national treasure. However, it is estimated to be worth over $135 million. Number 8. The Last Supper. It is a late 15th century mural painting by Italian artist Leonardo da Vinci, housed by the convent of Santa Maria delle Grazie in Milan, Italy. It is one of the Western world's most recognizable paintings. The work is assumed to have been started around 1495 or 1496 and finished in 1498, and was commissioned as part of a plan of renovations to the church and its convent buildings by Leonardo's patron Lodovico Sforza, Duke of Milan. The painting represents the scene of the Last Supper of Jesus with his apostles. Leonardo has depicted the consternation that occurred among the 12 apostles when Jesus announced that one of them would betray him. Due to the methods used, a variety of environmental factors, and intentional damage, little of the original painting remains today despite numerous restoration attempts, the last being completed in 1999. The Last Supper covers an end wall of the dining hall at the monastery. In common with other depictions of the Last Supper from this period, Leonardo sits the diners on one side of the table so that none of them has his back to the viewer. Most previous depictions excluded Judas by placing him alone on the opposite side of the table from the other 11 disciples and Jesus, or placing halos around all the disciples except Judas. Leonardo, instead, has Judas lean back into shadow. Leonardo reportedly used the likeliness of people in and around Milan as inspiration for the painting's figures. One story goes that the convent's prior complained to Sforza of Leonardo's laziness as he wandered the streets to find a criminal to base Judas on. Leonardo responded that if he could find no one else to suit the role, the prior would make a good model. While the painting was being executed, Leonardo's friend, the mathematician Luca Pacioli, called it a symbol of man's burning desire for salvation. The painting has an impressive number of remakes, among which Salvador Dali's take on the Last Supper, painted in 1955, The Sacrament of the Last Supper, with Jesus portrayed as blond and clean-shaven, pointing upward to a spectral torso, while the apostles are gathered around the table, heads bowed so that none may be identified. It is reputed to be one of the most popular paintings in the collection of the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. An important remake is also a 16th century oil-on-canvas copy that is conserved in Belgium, and it reveals many details that are unfortunately no longer visible on the original. The Last Supper has been the target of much speculation by writers and historical revisionists alike, usually centered on purported hidden messages or hints found within the painting, especially since the publication of Dan Brown's novel, The Da Vinci Code, in 2003, in which one of the characters suggests that the person to Jesus' right, left of Jesus from the viewer's perspective, is actually Mary Magdalene. It also states that there was a letter glaring in the center of the painting, the letter M, standing for Matrimonio or Mary Magdalene. This speculation originated in earlier books. Art historians hold that the figure is the Apostle John, who only appears feminine due to Leonardo's characteristic fascination with blurring the lines between the sexes, quality which is found in his other paintings, such as Saint John the Baptist, painted around 1513 or 1516. According to Ross King, an expert on Italian art, Mary Magdalene's appearance at the Last Supper would not have been controversial, and Leonardo would have had no motive to disguise her as one of the other disciples, since she was widely venerated in her role as the apostle to the apostles, and was the patron of the Dominican order for whom the Last Supper was painted. Giovanni Maria Palla, an Italian musician, has even indicated that the position of hands and loaves of bread can be interpreted as notes on a musical staff, and, if read from right to left, as was characteristic of Leonardo's writing, form a musical composition. Number 7. The 1889 self-portrait of Van Gogh. Dutch post-impressionist artist Vincent van Gogh painted a self-portrait in oil on canvas in September 1889. The work, which may have been Van Gogh's last self-portrait, was painted shortly before he left Saint-Remy-de-Provence in southern France. The painting is now at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. This self-portrait was one of about 30 Van Gogh produced over a 10-year period, and these were an important part of his work as a painter. He would paint himself because he often lacked the money to pay for models. Van Gogh sent the picture to his younger brother, the art dealer Theo. Along with the picture, he also sent a letter which read, "You will need to study the picture for a time. I hope you will notice that my facial expressions have become much calmer, although my eyes have the same insecure look as before, or so it appears to me." According to Beckett, the dissolving colors and at the same time turbulent patterns signal a feeling of strain and pressure, symbolizing the artist's state of mind, which is under a mental, physical, and emotional pressure. The original portrait was sold for $71.5 million. Number 6. The Birth of Venus. The Birth of Venus is a painting by the Italian artist Sandro Botticelli, probably made in the mid-1480s. It depicts the goddess Venus arriving at the shore after her birth when she had emerged from sea, fully grown, called Venus Anadyomene and often depicted in art. The painting is in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, Italy. Although the two are not a pair, the painting is inevitably discussed with Botticelli's other very large mythological painting, the Primavera, also in the Uffizi. They are among the most famous paintings in the world and icons of the Italian Renaissance. As depictions of subjects from classical mythology on a very large scale, they were virtually unprecedented in Western art since classical antiquity. Most art historians agree that the birth does not require complex analysis to decode its meaning, a straightforward treatment of a traditional scene from Greek mythology, and its appeal is sensory and very accessible, hence its enormous popularity. In the painting, there are a number of occurrences of earlier images that have been changed and painted over, revealed by modern scientific testing. The Hora, Greek goddess on the left of the picture, originally had low classical sandals, and the color on a medal she holds out is an afterthought. The hair of Venus and the flying couple was changed. There is use of gold as a pigment for highlights on hair, wings, textiles, the shell, and the landscape. This was all apparently applied after the painting was framed. It was finished with a cool gray varnish, probably using egg yolk. Venus's body is anatomically improbable, with elongated neck and torso. Her pose is impossible, although she stands in a classical contrapposto stance, shifting most of her weight on one foot. Her weight is shifted too far over the left leg for the pose to be held. The proportions and poses of the wings to the left do not quite make sense, and none of the figures cast shadows. It has long been suggested that Botticelli was commissioned to paint the work by the Medici family of Florence, which, if you haven't heard of, were basically a banking family and political dynasty that supported the artists of those times. Although there are ancient and modern texts that are relevant, no single text provides the precise imagery of the painting, which has led scholars to propose many sources and interpretations. Many art historians who specialize in the Italian Renaissance have found Neoplatonic interpretations, such as the idea of divine love in the form of a nude Venus. A Neoplatonic reading of Botticelli's Birth of Venus suggests that 15th century viewers would have looked at the painting and felt their minds lifted to the realm of divine love. The original painting is estimated to be worth $10 million. Number 5. The Starry Night. The Starry Night is an oil-on-canvas painting by Dutch post-impressionist painter Vincent van Gogh. Painted in June 1889, it depicts the view from the east-facing window of his asylum room at Saint-Remy-de-Provence, just before sunrise, with the addition of an imaginary village. It has been in the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City since 1941. Widely regarded as Van Gogh's magnum opus, it is one of the most recognized paintings in the history of Western culture. In the aftermath of the 23rd of December 1888 breakdown that resulted in the self-mutilation of his left ear, Van Gogh voluntarily admitted himself to the St. Paul de Mazolle lunatic asylum on 8th of May 1889. Housed in a former monastery, St. Paul de Mazolle catered to the wealthy and was less than half full when Van Gogh arrived, allowing him to occupy not only a second-story bedroom, but also a ground-floor room for use as a painting studio. During this period, he produced some of the best-known works of his career. The Starry Night was painted mid-June. By around 18th of June, the date he wrote to his brother Theo to say he had a new study of a starry sky. Van Gogh depicted the view at different times of the day and under various weather conditions, including sunrise, moonrise, sunshine-filled days, overcast days, windy days, and one day with rain. While the hospital staff did not allow Van Gogh to paint in his bedroom, he was able there to make sketches in ink or charcoal on paper. Eventually, he would base newer variations on previous versions. In a letter to a painter from late November 1889, Van Gogh actually referred to the painting as a failure. In a letter to his brother, however, he compared the stars to dots on a map and mused that, as one takes a train to travel on Earth, we take death to reach a star, confessing to a tremendous need for, shall I say the word, for religion. So I go outside at night to paint the stars. Art historian Lawrence South finds a symbolist subtext in the Starry Night, saying that the painting is a traditional religious subject in disguise and a sublimated image of Van Gogh's deepest religious feelings. The estimated value of the original painting is well over $100 million. Number 4. The Creation of Adam. It is a fresco painting by Italian artist Michelangelo, which forms part of the Sistine Chapel ceiling, painted between 1508 and 1512. It illustrates the biblical creation narrative from the book of Genesis, in which God gives life to Adam, the first man. The fresco is part of a complex iconographic scheme and is chronologically the fourth in the series of panels depicting episodes from Genesis. The image of the touching hands of God and Adam has become iconic of humanity. The painting has been reproduced in countless imitations and parodies. Michelangelo's creation of Adam is one of the most replicated religious paintings of all time. In 1505, Michelangelo was invited back to Rome by the newly elected Pope Julius II. He was commissioned to build the Pope's tomb, which was to include 40 statues and be finished in 5 years. During the same period, Michelangelo painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, which took approximately 4 years to complete, between 1508 and 1512. According to Condivi's account, Bramante, who was working on the building of St. Peter's Basilica, resented Michelangelo's commission for the Pope's tomb and convinced the Pope to commission him in a medium with which he was unfamiliar, hoping that he would fail at the task. Michelangelo persuaded Pope Julius to give him a free hand and proposed a more complex scheme, representing the creation, the fall of man, the promise of salvation through the prophets, and the genealogy of Christ. The work is part of a larger scheme of decoration within the chapel, which represents much of the doctrine of the Catholic Church. The composition stretches over 500 square meters of ceiling and contains over 300 figures. At its center are 9 episodes from the book of Genesis, divided into 3 groups: God's creation of the earth, God's creation of humankind and their fall from God's grace, and lastly, the state of humanity as represented by Noah and his family. God's right arm is outstretched to impart the spark of life from his own finger into that of Adam, whose left arm is extended in a pose mirroring God's, a reminder that man is created in the image and likeness of God. Another point is that Adam's finger and God's finger aren't touching, suggesting the boundaries between humanity and divine. The person protected by God's left arm represents Eve due to the figure's feminine appearance and gaze towards Adam, and the 11 other figures symbolically represent the souls of Adam and Eve's unborn descendants, the entire human race. Several hypotheses have been put forward about the meaning of the creation of Adam's highly original composition, many of them taking Michelangelo's well-documented expertise in human anatomy as their starting point. It has been noted that the background figures and shapes portrayed behind the figure of God appear to be an anatomically accurate picture of the human brain. Alternatively, it has been observed that the red cloth around God has the shape of a human uterus. It would explain the navel that appears on Adam, which is at first perplexing because he was created, not born of a woman, as Enrico Bruschini states. Also, the left side of Adam's torso contains an extra concealed rib. Due to Michelangelo's in-depth knowledge of human anatomy, he insinuates that his rib outline is intentional and represents the rib of Eve. Campos suggests that this extra rib inclusion was a way for Michelangelo to represent Adam and Eve being created side by side, which differs from the Catholic tradition that states Eve was created after Adam. There is significant evidence that Michelangelo radically disagreed with many Catholic traditions and had a tumultuous relationship with the commissioner of the ceiling, Pope Julius II. Thus, Campos suggests that the rib inclusion was an intentional way to slight Pope Julius II and the Catholic Church without having to admit fault, as very few people knew anything about human anatomy at the time and could challenge the piece. Number 3. The Scream. The Scream is the popular name given to a composition created by Norwegian expressionist artist Edvard Munch in 1893. The original German title given by Munch to his work was The Scream of Nature, and the Norwegian title is Shriek. The agonized face in the painting has become one of the most iconic images of art, seen as symbolizing the anxiety of the human condition. Munch recalled that he had been out for a walk at sunset when suddenly the setting sunlight turned the clouds a blood red. I was walking along the road with 2 friends. The sun was setting. Suddenly, the sky turned blood red. I paused, feeling exhausted, and leaned on the fence. There was blood and tongues of fire above the blue-black fjord and the city. My friends walked on, and I stood there trembling with anxiety, and I sensed an infinite scream passing through nature. Munch created 2 versions in paint and 2 in pastels, as well as a lithograph stone from which several prints survive. Among theories advanced to account for the reddish sky in the background is the artist's memory of the effects of the powerful volcanic eruption of Krakatoa, which deeply tinted sunset skies red in parts of the Western Hemisphere for months during 1883 and 1884, about a decade before Munch painted The Scream. Alternatively, it has been suggested that the proximity of both a slaughterhouse and a lunatic asylum on the site depicted in the painting may have offered some inspiration. At the time of painting the work, Munch's maniac depressive sister, Laura Catherine, was a patient at a mental asylum. In 1978, The Munch scholar Robert Rosenblum suggested that the strange, sexless creature in the foreground of the painting was inspired by a Peruvian mummy, which Munch could have seen at the 1889 Exposition Universelle in Paris. However, later studies have disputed the Italian theory, as Munch never visited Florence until after painting the Scream. The imagery of the Scream has been compared to that which an individual suffering from depersonalization disorder experiences, a feeling of distortion of the environment and one's self. It has been widely interpreted as representing the universal anxiety of modern humanity. The Scream has been the target of a number of thefts and theft attempts, some of them causing permanent damage to the painting. The 1895 pastel-on-board version of the work, owned by Norwegian businessman Peter Olsen, sold at Sotheby's in London for a record price of nearly $120 million at auction on the 2nd of May 2012. In the late 20th century, the Scream was imitated, parodied, and, following its copyright expiration, outright copied, which led to it acquiring an iconic status in popular culture. Number 2. Girl with a Pearl Earring. It is an oil painting by Dutch Golden Age painter Johannes Vermeer, dated around 1665. Going by various names over the centuries, it became known by its present title towards the end of the 20th century after the large pearl earring worn by the girl portrayed there. The work has been in the collection of an art museum on the western coast of the Netherlands since 1902 and has been the subject of various literary treatments. In 2006, the Dutch public selected it as the most beautiful painting in the Netherlands. The painting is a tronie, the Dutch 17th century description of a head that was not meant to be a portrait. It depicts a European girl wearing an exotic dress, an oriental turban, and an improbably large pearl earring. In 2014, Dutch astrophysicist Vincent Ike raised doubts about the material of the earring and argued that it looks more like polished tin than pearl on the grounds of the specular reflection, the pear shape, and the large size of the earring. The work is oil on canvas and it is signed but not dated. During the most recent restoration in 1994, it was discovered that the dark background, today somewhat mottled, was originally a deep enamel-like green. However, the two organic pigments of the green glaze have faded. The painting was exhibited as part of a Vermeer show at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. in 1965 and 1966. In 2012, as part of a traveling exhibition, while the original museum was being renovated and expanded, the painting was exhibited in Japan at the National Museum of Western Art in Tokyo, and in 2013 and 2014 in the United States, where it was shown at the High Museum in Atlanta, the Young Museum in San Francisco, and in New York City at the Frick Collection. Later, in 2014, it was exhibited in Bologna, Italy. In June 2014, it returned to its original museum, which stated that the painting would not leave the museum in the future. The lack of eyebrows and featureless background had led to speculation that Vermeer was painting an idealized or abstract face. The later discoveries showed that he was painting a real person in a real space. The pearl has been described as an illusion due to having no contour and also no hook to hang it from the girl's ear. Generally, the English title of the painting was simply Head of a Young Girl, although it was sometimes known as The Pearl. One critic explained that this name was given not just from the detail of the earring, but because the figure glows with an inner radiance against the dark background. Now, before I reveal the most famous painting of all time, let's look into a few honorable mentions. The Wave by Hokusai. The Great Wave of Kanagawa, also known as the Great Wave or simply the Wave, is a woodblock print by the Japanese ukiyo-e artist Hokusai. It was published sometime between 1829 and 1833 in the late Edo period as the first print in Hokusai's series 36 Views of Mount Fuji. It is Hokusai's most famous work and is often considered the most recognizable work of Japanese art in the world. American Gothic by Grant Wood. American Gothic is a 1930 painting by Grant Wood in the collection of the Art Institute of Chicago. He was inspired to paint what is now known as the American Gothic House in Eldon, Iowa, along with the kind of people he fancied should live in that house. It depicts a farmer standing beside his daughter, often mistakenly assumed to be his wife. The painting is named for the house's architectural style. Guernica by Picasso. Guernica is a large 1937 oil painting on canvas by Spanish artist Pablo Picasso. One of Picasso's best-known works, Guernica is regarded by many art critics as one of the most moving and powerful anti-war paintings in history. It is exhibited in the Museo Reina Sofia in Madrid. And now finally, it shouldn't take you by surprise that the most well-known painting of all time is number 1. Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa or La Gioconda is a half-length portrait painting by the Italian artist Leonardo da Vinci. It is considered an archetypal masterpiece of the Italian Renaissance and has been described as the best known, the most visited, the most written about, the most sung about, the most parodied work of art in the world. The painting's novel qualities include the subject's expression, which is frequently described as enigmatic, the monumentality of the composition, the subtle modeling of forms, and the atmospheric illusionism. The painting is likely of the Italian noblewoman Lisa Gherardini, the wife of Francesco del Giocondo. It had been believed to have been painted between 1503 and 1506. However, Leonardo may have continued working on it as late as 1517. It was acquired by King Francis I of France and is now the property of the French Republic itself, on permanent display at the Louvre Museum in Paris since 1797. The Mona Lisa is one of the most valuable paintings in the world. It holds the Guinness World Record for the highest known insurance valuation in history at $100 million in 1962, equivalent to $660 million in 2019. The model, Lisa del Giocondo, was a member of the Gherardini family of Florence and Tuscany, and the wife of wealthy Florentine silk merchant Francesco del Giocondo. The painting is thought to have been commissioned for their new home and to celebrate the birth of their second son, Andrea. The Italian name for the painting, La Gioconda, means happy or jovial, a pun on the feminine form of Lisa's married name, Giocondo. Around 1505, Raphael executed a pen and ink sketch in which the columns flanking the subject are more apparent. Experts universally agree that it is based on Leonardo's portrait. A number of experts have argued that Leonardo made two versions because of the uncertainty concerning its dating and commissioner, as well as its fate following Leonardo's death in 1519, and the difference of details in Raphael's sketch, which may be explained by the possibility that he made the sketch from memory. The hypothetical first portrait, displaying prominent columns, would have been commissioned by Giocondo around 1503 and left unfinished in Leonardo's pupil and assistant's possession until his death in 1524. The second, commissioned by Giuliano de' Medici around 1513, would have been sold by Leonardo's student to Francis I in 1518 and is the one in the Louvre today. Others believe that there was only one true Mona Lisa, but are divided as to the two aforementioned fates. The painting was kept at the Palace of Fontainebleau until Louis XIV moved it to the Palace of Versailles, where it remained until the French Revolution. In 1797, it went on permanent display at the Louvre. In the early 21st century, French scientist Pascal Cotte hypothesized a hidden portrait underneath the surface of the painting. However, that has been proven to be highly improbable. The Mona Lisa bears a strong resemblance to many Renaissance depictions of the Virgin Mary, who was at the time seen as an ideal for womanhood. Her gaze is fixed on the observer. The woman appears alive to an unusual extent, which Leonardo achieved by his method of not drawing outlines. The soft blending creates an ambiguous mood, mainly in two features, the corners of the mouth and the corners of the eyes. Mona Lisa has no clearly visible eyebrows or eyelashes. Some researchers claim that it was common at this time for gentlewomen to pluck these hairs, as they were considered unsightly. In 2007, French engineer Pascal Cotte announced that his ultra-high-resolution scans of the painting provide evidence that Mona Lisa was originally painted with eyelashes and with visible eyebrows, but that these had gradually disappeared over time, perhaps as a result of overcleaning. Cotte discovered the painting had been reworked several times with changes made to the size of the Mona Lisa's face and the direction of her gaze. He also found that in one layer the subject was depicted wearing numerous hairpins and a headdress adorned with pearls, which was later scrubbed out and overpainted. Research in 2003 by Professor Margaret Livingstone of Harvard University said that Mona Lisa's smile disappears when observed with direct vision, known as foveal. Because of the way the human eye processes visual information, it is less suited to pick up shadows directly. However, peripheral vision can pick up shadows well. The Mona Lisa began influencing contemporary Florentine painting even before its completion, including Salvador Dali's self-portrait as Mona Lisa in 1954. A version of the Mona Lisa known as the Isleworth Mona Lisa, and also known as the earlier Mona Lisa, was first bought by an English nobleman in 1778 and was rediscovered in 1913 by Hugh Blaker, an art connoisseur. The painting was presented to the media in 2012 by the Mona Lisa Foundation. It is a painting of the same subject as Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa. The painting is claimed by a majority of experts to be mostly an original work of Leonardo dating from the early 16th century. Other experts, however, deny the attribution. On the 21st of August 1911, the painting was stolen by an Italian patriot who believed that the painting belonged to Italy, and recovered only after 2 years. At first, Pablo Picasso was one of the suspects and was even arrested until the real culprit was found. On the 30th of December 1956, Bolivian Hugo Ungaza threw a rock at the Mona Lisa while it was on display at the Louvre. He did so with such force that it shattered the glass case and dislodged a speck of pigment near the left elbow. The painting was protected by glass because a few years earlier, a man who claimed to be in love with the painting had cut it with a razor blade and tried to steal it. Since then, bulletproof glass had been used to shield the painting from any further attacks. Subsequently, on the 21st of April 1974, while the painting was on display at the Tokyo National Museum, a woman sprayed it with red paint as a protest against the museum's failure to provide access for disabled people. On the 2nd of August 2009, a Russian woman, distraught over being denied French citizenship, threw a ceramic teacup purchased at the Louvre. The vessel shattered against the glass enclosure. Fortunately, in both cases, the painting was undamaged. Alright, this should conclude the top of most famous paintings in the world. I hope you enjoyed learning new information about these iconic art pieces, and I'm really curious to know if you agree with the list. Is there any painting I should have included but didn't? Voice your opinions down below. Stay tuned for the next video for even more amazing general knowledge tops.